Hi everybody, Patrick here from EngineeringShock.com, electroniclessons.com, and paintballprops.com. This is an assembly video for our PIR based motion detector security system DIY electronics kit. I sell them fully assembled and in DIY kit form. I'm going to show you how to put together the PCB right now. If you want to see the this unit in action with the loud siren, the AC to DC adapter, the 16-digit keypad, the LCD and the PIR sensor, click on the link below. In any case, let me talk about the components. A 5-volt relay, custom PCB, 7 10k ohm resistors, a 3.5k ohm resistor, a 100 ohm resistor, 3 100 microfarad electrolytic capacitors, 3 0.1 microfarad ceramic capacitors, a stereo connector for our siren, a 28-pin dip socket, 1602A LCD, a 5mm power jack, 7805 5-volt regulator, programmed microcontroller, single 1N4001 diode, 2 NPN transistors, a 3-pin header, and an 8-pin header. And what we're going to do first is we're going to solder our resistors and then our capacitors and diode. And from there we'll move on to the rest of the components. For our 7 10k ohm resistors, we're going to place those in the R8 slot labeled 10k R8, our R7 slot labeled 10k R7, our R9 slot labeled 10k R9, and then R2, R3, R4, and R5 right here. There's also a 10k ohm resistor slot to the right of the board, but that is not to be populated. So solder those all into place. Resistors do not have any polarity, so just make sure that your solder joints are strong and that there are no shorting. There is no shorting, rather. Your 100 ohm resistor goes in the LED slot. It's labeled LED. It's a resistor on the it's a resistor slot, but it's labeled LED, and that is because that 100 ohm resistor limits power to the LCD, which we will solder on later. The 3.5k ohm resistor goes in the R1 slot labeled R1 4K7. Now, why are we soldering a 3.5k ohm into a 4K7 slot? Because these LCDs, they're all a little bit different. There's about 500 manufacturers of these LCDs, and they all have a different contrast. And so, for the specific LEDs that I have, or LCDs that I have rather, I find that you get the best result with a 3.5k ohm resistor. So solder that in the 4K7 slot labeled R1 4K7. The ceramic capacitors, all labeled 104, all have equal-sized leads, and that means that there's no polarization. You can solder them in either way as long as you place them into the right slots. The electrolytics, on the other hand, have a long lead and a short lead, and you have to be very, very careful to solder them in the right orientation, or else when you power it up, pop, and your circuit might either completely short out, or if the capacitor blows and it doesn't short out the circuit, it still won't do what it was supposed to be doing. In any case, the 0.1 microfarad capacitors go in the C6 slot, labeled C6 0.1U, the C1 slot labeled C1 0.1U, and the C5 slot labeled C5 0.1U. U means micro. The electrolytic capacitors go in the C2 slots, the C2 slot, C4 slot, and C3 slot, and they are all labeled 100U for 100 micro. And on each footprint, you'll notice that there is a plus sign. Now, you probably can't see it from this angle through my camera, but in the case of C2, the right pin has a little plus sign underneath it, and that means that we want to place our long lead in that hole. Long lead is positive, short lead is negative. So in the case of C2, short lead in the left hole, long lead in the right hole. In the case of C4, there's a little plus sign above the left hole. Long lead in the left hole, short lead in the right hole. In the case of C3, there's a plus sign again above the left hole, so long lead in the left hole, short lead in the right hole. Make sure you solder them in properly. Next, we'll do our diode, our transistors, and our headers. First of all, the diode. The diode goes in the D1 slot right here. Now you'll notice that on the upper part of the footprint, the diode has a white stripe, and there's no white stripe on the bottom of the footprint. The diode has a white stripe on one side and black on the other. From a bird's eye view, you want to make sure that the white stripe is matching the white stripe on the footprint. So the white stripe should be facing the top hole, and the black side of the diode should be facing the bottom of the hole. Now the two headers are easy. We're going to ignore this 4-pin header here, solder our 3-pin header with the long leads facing up on this 3-pin terminal, and our 8-pin header with the long pins facing up on this terminal. Now what I like to do is place the short leads through the top of the board, hold it down with my finger, and solder one lead. Then I check the top of the board to ensure that it's sitting at a 90-degree angle with the one solder joint holding it in place. If it is at 90 degrees, then I turn the board around and I carefully solder each of the pins. That's how I like to do it. You might have your own way of doing it, completely up to you. I find that's the easiest way to do it. In the case of the two transistors, there is a curved side of the transistor and a flat side. The flat side is facing up right now. As you can see, it pivots on its curved side. The flat side has writing on it. And these two transistors go in the T2 slot and the T1 slot. From a bird's eye view, you want to make sure that the flat side of the transistor is facing the flat side on the board. And that the curved side is facing the curved side of the footprint. If you turn those transistors around, they won't function properly. So in the case of T2 or T1, the flat side of the transistor is facing the bottom of the board, curved side is facing the back of the board. Same with T2. The curved side is facing the back of the board, and the flat side, from a bird's eye view, is facing the front of the board. Now make sure that when you solder all of these into place, that there are no shorts. Next, we will do our socket and our audio connector. These components are very easy. The audio connector, which we will connect to our siren, has 4 pins on the back and 1 pin in the front. And it goes right here. It only fits in one way. Make sure that all the pins are lining up with the holes before you place it in. Once placed, it should sit nicely into the board. Hold it down with one finger, turn the board around, and solder this lead right here. Then double check from the top that it's still sitting perfectly flat on the board, and then solder the last 4 pins. It should look very nice after you are finished soldering it. The socket, you might notice, has a notch on the left-hand side and nothing on the right-hand side. That notch is an indicator. You have to pay close attention. From a bird's eye view, that notch should be facing left on the board from this perspective. Now, what you'll notice as well is that on the footprint for the microcontroller, there's a little notch on the left-hand side. That's just telling you that from a bird's eye view, the notch should be facing left. It should drop nicely into the board. What I do is solder 1 pin after holding it down on one side with my finger, and then once that pin is soldered, I turn it around, making sure that it's still flat, and then I solder the rest of the pins. Make sure that each of the pins have a solid solder joint and that you don't do any shorting. I suggest you do this step later, but just so that it's fresh in your minds, the microcontroller has a notch on the left-hand side as well. So from a bird's eye view, match that side up with the socket side that has the notch to the left-hand side and the silk screen. Now, everyone has their different methods on placing the chips into the sockets, and you have to be careful. You don't want to mess up your chip. Now, what I like to do typically is to take the bottom pins, line them up, and then gently massage the top pins into place. I got lucky. Sometimes it's not so easy, but you just have to take your time and be gentle with them. Otherwise, you'll bend your pins. So next, we will do our relay, our 5mm jack, and our 7805. We are now almost done. The relay is the easiest component of these 3 to solder into place, in my opinion. It's got 3 leads on one side, 2 on the other. It only fits in one way in the relay slot right here. And it should fit in, it should just drop into place. Once you have it dropped into place, turn the board around, placing your finger over top of the back of the relay and solder 1 pin. Then turn it around, making sure it's flush to the board, then solder the rest of the pins. You'll want to make sure that they have nice solder joints on all 5 holes. The 7805 is also a relatively easy component. You'll notice on the board where the 7805 is supposed to rest, right here, that the left side is white, and the right side there's no color. It's just back to PCB. Now, the back of the 7805 is white or gray. You want to make sure that it is matching the footprint. So the gray side, white gray side, faces left from this perspective, and the black side with the writing on it, the face of the 7805, faces the chip. You'll want to place that in as far down as it'll go. Don't push it. Right about there. What I like to do is bend the right lead backwards, the left lead forward, and solder each pin carefully, and then I cut off the leads. Now, so what I mean by that is this. Just so it stays in place. Sorry if you can't see that. Just make sure that there are no shorts and that you cut the leads as low as you can. From there we have our power jack. It only fits in one way. Now you'll want to make sure that once it fits in, that you don't apply too much heat at once. Apply a little bit of solder here, then here, then here, then fill in the gaps. If you apply way too much heat for too long, you'll burn the plastic and you can potentially damage the connector. So just be careful when soldering that into place. Once we're done that, we're going to solder our LCD, and then we're going to give it a quick test. Lastly, the LCD. The LCD will come with a header already soldered to it because I need to test them prior to shipment. And what this LCD does is it fits in right here, the LCD connector. Fits in like this. You want to make sure that every single pin is seated properly into the holes. You just double check, then carefully turn it around and solder each pin on the bottom. Once you're done, carefully trim off the leads to each pin. There are 16 pins in total. Be very careful when you do this. Just solder each pin carefully, making sure that there are no shorts. Then use your wire cutters to simply clip the remaining part of the leads away. Just be gentle, and then we'll be ready to plug it in and test it. The hookup instructions are in the below video with the full manual, but all I'm really concerned about is the LCD. All of the rest of the circuitry is very basic. I just want to make sure that the LCD works. So you power it up, give it a second. Enter combo. LCD works great. So thanks for watching. I hope this helped in your assembly of this kit. Again, one last time, for the full video manual and hookup set of hookup instructions, please see the link below. Thanks again, guys.